Right, so today we're going to talk about my top 5 do's and don'ts for Foamsmiths. Which technically that's 10 things, because it's 5 do's and 5 don'ts. 5 plus 5 is 10. I mean, I can even do that math without a calculator. So is it my top 10? Top 5? It doesn't matter. I got some do's and don'ts I want to talk about. Welcome back to Building Steam. I'm Brian Fadrosh of Brian Fadrosh Designs. And yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down to the shop. I know it's been a hot minute since I've done a video, but I am back. Watch to the end of the video. I'll talk a little bit as to where I've been and why I haven't been around. But today I want to talk about my top 5 do's and don'ts of foamsmithing. This is for anybody who's just now getting into foamsmithing, who's been around for a while, because to be honest with you, some of this advice I still have to remind myself of to this day. So, with that being the case, and without further ado, let's get into it. Foamsmithing do and don't. Number 1, you do need EVA foam because, well, you want to be a foamsmith. So yes, that is something from the Department of Redundancy department, but you do need EVA foam. What you don't need to do is start with this stuff. And when I say this stuff, I mean the EVA floor mats from Harbor Freight, which all of us as foamsmiths have used, and I still use in my builds to this day. And I know there are some makers out there that use this stuff to great effect. Honestly, the 2 biggest builds that I have done that I am the most proud of, which are my Angel and my Warhammer Giant that are in the back corner, are made solely out of this stuff. In all honesty, I wish I had found the better EVA foams before making those, because now I just want to remake them out of the newer stuff, simply because I have found using better source material makes my builds even that much better. So you don't need to start with this stuff. And with starting with this stuff, I think what it does is it teaches you some kind of bad habits. 3 of those being, 1, you always have to sand off the texture off of one side of foam, which foam that's designed specifically for prop making and armor building and foamsmithing, you don't need to do. Secondly, it teaches you that it's okay for the surface to have pockmarks and gouges and be inconsistent, and that it should take you 3 times as long to get a really nice finish on it. The other thing that it teaches you is that it's okay to buy 1 pack of 4 of these and none of them be the same thickness, which in my opinion makes it much more difficult to be able to line up your seams. So while this stuff has its place, you don't need to start with this. This stuff is not designed for foamsmithing. This stuff is designed to put on your floor and stand on. There are many cost-effective alternatives that are out there that you can start with and start off on the right foot. Some of those examples being, you can go to Michael's and you can pick up their Art Minds EVA foam. I only seem to have these half dowels right now. I never really tried any of their larger sheets yet. The only thing I'm not crazy about with this stuff is I'm not crazy about the way it sands all that much. However, again, I would think that this is the next step up from floor mats. So by all means, definitely start with a better source material. Another supplier of EVA foam that I've heard really great things about, and I have to be honest, I haven't had the opportunity to really use a lot of their foam, is TNT Cosplay. They have terrific foam. I've heard really good things. The 2 things that I have experienced from TNT Cosplay that I really like is, 1, their Plastizo. This is the EVA foam that allows light to shine through it. I love this stuff. I got some ideas coming up to use what I have left of that. The other thing from TNT Cosplay that I really like and that I have to get more of are going to be their silver markers. And the next example that I have, you're going to understand why. So the 2 foams that I use predominantly the most, 1 definitely much more of than the other. This is the Yaya Han EVA foam that you can pick up at Joann's. And this stuff is okay. There are 2 things specifically I do not like about this foam. 1, I don't like the shore hardness. It doesn't bend all that much. It's really dense, so there's not a lot of give to it, which I'm not a fan of. But in a pinch, this stuff is pretty good, and I do like this stuff. The thing I really don't like about this is that it's black, so there are not enough silver Sharpie markers, say that 3 times fast, in the world to be able to, mark out all your patterns. Even the TNT Cosplay markers tend to have trouble with this stuff, so I'm not a huge fan of that. This is something that you should be starting with. You don't need to start with floor mat. However, my chosen foam, I guess is the easiest way to phrase it, is this stuff. And this is HD foam from SKS Props. You can get this at Blick Art Materials. For the record, if you are going to be looking into this, if you haven't tried this stuff yet, I cannot recommend this stuff highly enough. However, if you're going to purchase it, make sure you go through SKS Props links on his webpage to order it, simply because he'll get the credit for the purchase. But this stuff is amazing, and I wish I had known about this stuff and used this stuff for those 2 bigger builds. As of right now, for Bruce over here, the Lord of Blades, he is getting made out of all of this stuff. And to be honest with you, it's just been a much better experience in putting it all together. Again, floor mat has its place. However, don't feel that just because you're starting out, you have to start out with the lowest quality, cheapest stuff that you can find. Foamsmithing do and don't. Number 2, you don't need to know how to make your own patterns. You do need a pattern. So once you've established what you want to build, whether that be a shield, a sword, a gun, a full set of armor, a helmet, you're going to need a pattern to work from. Just diving in and freehanding everything, it's not going to work out as well as you'd want it to. And I say that from experience because that was the first armor build I ever did. Mine literally was, I took a flat sheet of floor mat, bent it in half, put a hole in the middle of it, and those were my shoulder pieces, and I just built off of that. I am not even going to show you that armor on film. However, with that being said, you do need a pattern. The good news is there are a ton of patterns available on the internets. And the really nice thing about it is once you start working with patterns, once you start figuring out how darts work, how seam lines line up, how you need to have a curve to make a bell shape for a shoulder pauldron, the more you start working with those established patterns, the quicker you start learning how you can start building your own. And then eventually you'll be able to work up to the point where you're taking plastic wrap, wrapping it around your head, almost suffocating, wrapping it in duct tape and still almost suffocating, and then building your own helmet pattern. So I would definitely suggest you don't need to know how to build a pattern, but you definitely need to start with a pattern. Some of the best patterns that I have come across that I use consistently even to this day, and a lot of them have taught me how to build my own patterns, are going to be the patterns that I purchased or got for free from SKS Props, Punish Props, Evil Ted Smith, Kamui Cosplay, Heroes Workshop, Sean Prod. These guys do fantastic templates. They give you tutorials. Lost Wax is another one that is terrific. And what I'll do is I'll put links down in the description below for every single one of those guys. Their patterns are definitely worth the investment. And again, by having those established patterns and getting it really close to what maybe you have in your head or for the build that you want to do is a great launching pad in learning how to figure out how to build your own patterns. Foamsmithing do and don't. Number 3, you're going to need tools. You do not need really expensive, elaborate, expensive power tools. When you first start out, you'll see people doing tutorials and they're using band saws and scroll saws and laser cutters and vinyl cutters. And those are all terrific tools. However, you don't need those to start out with. Starting out, you need some real basic stuff. So the first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need stuff to measure with. So calipers, compasses, scribes. I find these really help for getting a consistent line across. But one of the biggest things you're going to want to invest in are going to be some metal straight edge rulers. The reason why you want to do metal rulers is simply because not only will this allow you to be able to measure things, this also allows you to be able to get really straight cuts and practice holding your blade perpendicular to what you're cutting so you get a really nice clean cut, because as we all know, that's how you get really good seams, is you have really straight perpendicular cuts. So, talking about cutting foam, what can you use to cut foam? Most people will automatically think of scissors. Scissors will come through in a pinch if you're talking about like 1mm foam or craft foam, but even still, I wouldn't recommend it. The thicker foams that you're going to be working with, scissors will not cut it. Ha! See what I did there? Also, if you happen to be married to a fabric artist like I am, do not use their really good sewing shears to cut foam, ever. Don't ever do that, because they will cut you. And I don't mean the shears, I mean the person. They will cut you if you do that. So what do you use to cut foam? Most people use these, which are the extendable blades that you can get at any hardware store. You can get these through Cosplay supply shops, and these are terrific. The reason why I don't use these all that much is simply because I find I have a really heavy hand, and my hand tends to wander. So with that being the case, what ends up happening is these are pretty thin. So with that being the case, they tend to bend, and I don't get a nice straight cut. What I often find myself using is going to be this guy, which is an X-Acto blade. I find it's more comfortable in my hand. I have much better control when I'm cutting. This also allows me to get some really fine detail cuts as well. Regardless of which blades you're using, you're always going to want to invest in either a knife sharpener and understand how to use that and sharpen your blades, or you're going to want to purchase a lot of extra blades. You need a sharp blade to get a nice clean cut, and there is nothing that dulls a blade faster than EVA foam. The other cool thing that would be nice to be able to cut foam with is this, but you can't. I just wanted to do that because this is my new toy, and I wanted to be able to do that and have it work on camera, so that was kind of cool. Sorry, I digress. After you've cut the foam, you're going to want to shape the foam. So with shaping foam, we do that by applying heat. The last thing I would ever recommend is taking foam and putting it over your stove while it's running. You don't want to do that. You want to invest in a heat gun. This is the first heat gun I ever purchased. I bought this thing like 6-7 years ago. It literally has two settings. There's hot and there's hotter. I have always used this. A hair dryer will not heat foam up enough to either A, bend it, or B, heat seal the cover of it or the top of it to get a really nice finish. So you want to invest in a heat gun. There are really expensive ones out there that you can tweak what temperature it is, whether it be, a soft candle flame to, the surface of the sun. Regardless of what heat gun you get, you want to get a heat gun, not use a hair dryer. You want to glue foam together, so one of the tools that you're going to need are adhesives. And basically, there's three that most people use. There is hot glue. I always use high-temp hot glue simply because I have a tendency of leaving my stuff in the car. You'll find out if you ever leave an EVA foam build in a hot car why you want to use high-temp hot glue. But for structural stuff, I wouldn't suggest it all that much simply because I don't think it really adheres all that well. You can use CA glue or super glue. The problem is if it's a very large piece, you're going to be going through a lot of this very quickly. I also find that cures very rigidly. So sometimes you don't want that to have that really sharp part to it. So what I always suggest and what most people will suggest is using contact cement. And contact cement is always going to be your go-to adhesive. There are two types that predominantly are used in foam smithing. There is DAP weldwood and there is barge cement. Barge cement being the more expensive. DAP weldwood is what I use for two reasons. One, because it is the more inexpensive version. Sometimes you may want to do 2 coats of this stuff before you apply it together and stick it together. However, I also like DAP weldwood simply because I invariably always run out of contact cement when I really need it. And I can literally drive 3 miles down the road and pick it up at my local hardware store. Last but not least, the one tool that you do want to invest in, even when you're starting out, is going to be a rotary tool. Having a rotary tool absolutely changed the way not only do I do my builds, but how I detail my builds. A rotary tool gives you so much variety for what you're doing. It's also a terrific tool in order to clean up your cuts, your edges, your seam lines. It is just, it is incredibly versatile, and you definitely want to get a rotary tool. You don't, I'm not going to say you have to get a Dremel. You don't have to get a Fordham, which I'm going to get because those are really cool. I want the foot pedal, so I'm eventually going to get a Fordham. But as of right now, I have a Dremel. The two things about Dremels that you will always want to get, or any rotary tool, I should say, when you're first starting out are two things. One, you always want to try to get one of these flex shafts. They're a little expensive, but they are definitely worth it because what this enables you to do is really be able to get some really fine detail work in. So you definitely want to be able to get a flex shaft. The other thing that you definitely want to get are accessory kits because we all love accessories. The really nice thing about accessory kits is you start finding different ones that you didn't know existed, whether it be a different type of sanding drum or a grinding drum or a sanding drum or the parts that you can dig pieces out of. This really starts opening up a whole new world as to what you can do as far as detailing goes with a Dremel. Or a rotary tool. I just call it a Dremel because it's, it's like Kleenex. You know, brand name becomes what you call it. But honestly, those are the basics that you need to start with foamsmithing. Nothing too expensive, nothing too elaborate. Yes, laser cutters are great. No, you don't need one. Foamsmithing do's and don'ts number 4. You don't need to compare yourself to what other people are doing, but you do need to not compare yourself to what other people are doing. I am just as guilty of this as anybody else, and as if you're first starting out as a foamsmith, you're going to run into this. You're going to start building something, and then you're going to go online, whether it be on Facebook, Instagram, your favorite maker's page, and you're going to see what they're building, and you're going to look at your stuff, and you're going to want to light it on fire and never make again. Don't do that. I know this one's not really a do and a don't, but it kind of is. Don't compare yourself to what other makers are doing. Let what other makers are doing inspire you to make something for yourself in the way that you're going to make it. Simply because that insidious circle of imposter syndrome and not being good enough and why can't my stuff look as great as this person's, that voice is going to come, and that voice is going to scream in your ear, and you need to do everything that you possibly can to not listen to it. Because here's the deal. When it all comes down to it, you're building this stuff for you. You need to be happy with what you're making. If you're happy with what you're making, forget what everybody else is doing. This isn't a competition, as my wife likes to remind me all the time. And honestly, it becomes a competition sometimes, even for me. But again, you don't need to compare yourself to what other people are doing, but you definitely do need to not compare yourself to what other people are doing. Let the process be fun. Let the work that they're doing inspire you to be better. The only person that you should ever compare yourself to is yourself. Always, always, always strive to make your next project better than the last one you did. If you're doing that, you're a master maker and a foamsmith par excellence, because that is what it should come down to. And last but not least, foamsmithing do's and don't number 5. You don't need to do it perfectly, but you do need to finish it. There's a phrase out there that I very firmly believe in, and that is, done is always going to be better than perfect. Because it's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to have a perfect seam line. You're not always going to get that detailed trim just right. It's going to happen. Done is always better than perfect. If you spend 10 years making the same piece over and over and over again, you're not going to grow as an artist, as a foamsmith, as a maker, as a cosplayer, and honestly, as a person. And again, one of those things that I do myself struggle with. Done is always going to be better than perfect. Finish the project. Finish what you started out to do. Whether that be making a helmet that looks a little cockeyed, or making a helmet that is absolutely perfect. Those happy accidents happen. It should always be about growing. It should always be about getting better. And I know that sounds a lot like the one that I just talked about, but it's true. Done is always going to be better than perfect. Done is always going to be the accomplishment that you want to set for yourself. Finish the project. Even when you get to the point where you absolutely detest it and you hate it and it's not right and God, I should just light it on fire. Don't. Finish it. Learn from it. Figure out the mistakes that you made, and then don't repeat those mistakes on the next project. And here's the other cool thing. You can always make another one because you were smart and saved your patterns and remembered the mistakes that you made. So guys, those are my top 5 do's and don'ts of foamsmithing, kind of basic 101, a little bit of what you need, what you don't need, what you need to do, what you don't need to do, and hopefully you learned something, or if anything, helped you realize that when those little voices in the back of your head are saying you're not as good as everybody else, it helps you not listen to them, because that imposter syndrome is horrible. And honestly, and going forward, I'm going to be doing a video about that specifically. So, as I'm sure you all are aware, there was a little bit of a break from doing videos. Sheila hasn't posted one lately because, well, as she will tell you, it was my turn to post a video, and I kind of didn't for a couple weeks. And the main reason for that being, there's really two. And this is one of those things that I was telling you I wanted to kind of let everybody know about. First off, it was, well, we obviously got the new camera. So with getting the new camera, I was trying to figure out what an aperture was, how exposure works, shutter speed, all that good stuff, and trying to add that skill to my skill sets. Simply because I found that, one, I kind of got into photography and hopefully videography at some point. But I was enjoying it, and I was enjoying that little bit of a break from what I would normally be doing, which is being down in here. But it also started getting to the point where I was spending more time doing that than down here. So obviously I had to kind of reevaluate my priorities. So obviously I wanted to get this video completed, but also just let you kind of know that's what happened. I just kind of got sucked into that. The other thing that kind of prevented me from coming down here was everything else that's going on in the world. You know, whether you're talking the pandemic, politics, you know, your daily grind of having a day job, or this is your day job and that daily grind of, oh my God, am I going to get my next commission and all that other stuff, that kind of started getting to me. And it kind of really started wearing me down. And I kind of realized I needed to take a little bit of a break. So I did. The reason why I bring this up and the reason why I kind of point this out is simply because I know I'm not the only one going through that right now. We all are, because this is our new normal and it's weird and none of us like it. And there's no conventions. And why the hell am I making anything in my shop anyway? Because I can't show it off. And you can. You can show it off by joining makers groups, by joining cosplay groups, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, which I haven't done yet. Maybe I should do TikTok. I don't know. I don't understand TikTok. It confuses me. But what I'm trying to say is if you're struggling and you're finding it really hard to be able to get into making again, I really hope that you find your way back to it. Because, you know, now that I am, whether it be through working on Bruce or working with the camera and the photography and all that good stuff, I'm kind of reigniting that desire to want to make and produce art and kind of enjoy the thing that, you know, I've missed doing. So if you're struggling with that, leave us a comment down below. Be more than happy to talk to you about that. The other thing I wanted to mention is I'm going to be starting a Discord channel. I haven't quite figured it all out yet. I'm going to be asking my buddy Tobias to help me with that, but I'm going to be starting out a Discord channel. I'm sure Sheila will join me on there as well. So that'd be another great way that we can connect. But, you know, if you kind of need a sympathetic ear and, you know, maybe help someone try to get you to get a little bit more motivated, hopefully this video did that. And if there's anything specific that you'd like to see us do, by all means, put it in the comments down below. As always, certainly hope that you enjoy what we're doing here on the channel. If you do, make sure you're hitting the like button. Please, by all means, make sure you're hitting the subscribe button if you already haven't. But by all means, ladies and gentlemen, please take care of yourself. Keep making, keep creating. I'll see you in the next episode.